The autumn wind carried dust and desperation through the streets of Yuma, Arizona, in 1882. And Penelope Owens knew that by sunset she would belong to another man she had never met. She stood in the small back room of the saloon where her current owner kept his property, her hands trembling as she folded the 3 dresses that constituted everything she possessed in this world. 22 years old, and she had been sold 4 times already, passed from one debt to another like currency, like she was nothing more than a horse or a piece of furniture. The first time had been when she was 18, when her father's gambling debts had consumed everything including his only daughter. She had begged him not to do it, had fallen to her knees and pleaded, but desperation made monsters of men. The subsequent sales had been no different. Each time she thought perhaps this owner would be kinder, perhaps this situation would offer some small mercy, but each time she was proven wrong. When the money ran out or a better offer came along, she found herself standing in another room, packing those same 3 dresses, preparing to meet another stranger who had purchased her contract. She heard boots on the wooden stairs and her stomach clenched. Thomas Whitley, the saloon owner who currently held her papers, appeared in the doorway. He was a thick man with greasy hair and eyes that never quite met hers. "He's here," Whitley said, jerking his thumb toward the stairs. "Fellow name of Yates Hawthorne. Paid good money for your contract, so you best be grateful." Grateful. The word tasted like ash. Penelope smoothed her brown hair back from her face and straightened her shoulders. She had learned that showing fear only made things worse. "I understand. Come on then, don't keep the man waiting." She followed Whitley down the narrow staircase, her worn boots silent on the wood. The saloon's main room was relatively quiet this early in the afternoon, just a few men nursing drinks in the corners. But standing at the bar was someone she had not expected. Yates Hawthorne was younger than the men who had owned her before, perhaps 28 or 29, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore a simple brown vest over a cream shirt, dusty trousers, and a gun belt that sat comfortable on his hips like it belonged there. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a clear hazel that actually looked at her, really looked, like she was a person rather than a transaction. "This is her," Whitley said, his hand coming to rest on Penelope's shoulder in a way that made her skin crawl. "Penelope Owens. Good worker, quiet, does what she's told." Yates's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at Whitley's words, but he simply nodded. "I have the money." The exchange took only minutes. Papers were signed, money changed hands, and just like that, Penelope belonged to someone new. She stood perfectly still through it all, her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, willing herself to feel nothing. "You got everything?" Yates asked her directly, and she was so surprised to be addressed that it took her a moment to respond. "Yes, sir. Just upstairs." "I will wait." She climbed the stairs one more time, gathered her small bundle of possessions, and returned. Yates was standing near the door, his face unreadable. When she approached, he simply gestured for her to go ahead of him. Outside, the Arizona sun beat down mercilessly. A sturdy bay horse was tied to the rail, and beside it, a smaller chestnut mare. "You can ride?" Yates asked. "Yes, sir." "The mare is for you." Penelope looked at him sharply, searching for the trick, the catch. Men did not provide horses for their property. They made you walk, or if you were lucky, let you ride in a wagon. But Yates was already untying the bay, waiting for her with what appeared to be genuine patience. She approached the chestnut carefully, running her hand along the mare's neck. The horse whickered softly, and Penelope felt something crack in her chest, some small forgotten softness. She tied her bundle to the saddle and mounted, her body remembering the motion from years ago when life had been different. They rode out of Yuma heading northeast, and Penelope waited for Yates to speak, to tell her what he expected, what rules she would need to follow. But he remained silent, his eyes on the horizon, seemingly content to let the desert speak for them both. After an hour of riding, he finally broke the silence. "My ranch is about 3 hours from here. Small operation, just me and a couple of hands. I raise cattle, some horses." "Yes, sir." "You do not have to call me sir." She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They continued on through the afternoon, the landscape shifting around them in shades of gold and red. Penelope's mind raced with questions she did not dare ask. What did he want from her? What work would he demand? And most importantly, how long before he tired of her and sold her to someone else? As the sun began its descent, buildings appeared in the distance, a small ranch nestled against a backdrop of rocky hills. It was modest but well-maintained, with a main house, a barn, and several smaller structures. As they approached, 2 men emerged from the barn, both weather-worn and curious. "Boss," the older one called out, a man with gray threading through his beard, "was not expecting you back with company." "Marcus Finn, this is Penelope Owens. She will be staying with us." Yates dismounted smoothly and moved to help Penelope down, but she had already slid from the mare herself. The 2 ranch hands exchanged glances but said nothing beyond polite greetings. Penelope recognized the look, had seen it before. They were wondering what exactly she was to their boss, what purpose she served. "Marcus, would you take care of the horses?" Yates asked, then turned to Penelope. "Come on, I will show you the house." She followed him across the dusty yard to the main house, a sturdy structure with a covered porch. Inside, it was surprisingly clean and organized, with simple furniture and whitewashed walls. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and through a doorway she could see a kitchen. "There are 3 bedrooms, Yates said, setting his hat on a peg by the door. "Mine is there, the other 2 are down this hallway. You can take whichever you prefer." Penelope stared at him. "I do not understand. What is there to understand? You need a place to sleep." "But I thought—" She stopped, unsure how to voice what she had assumed, what every experience had taught her to expect. Yates turned to face her fully, and there was something in his expression that looked almost like pain. "I know what you thought. I know what men like Whitley told you I bought you for. But that is not why I did this." "Then why?" The question escaped before she could stop it, sharp and desperate. He was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on his gun belt. "Because I saw you 3 weeks ago in that saloon. I was passing through Yuma, stopped in for a drink, and I saw Whitley grab your arm hard enough to bruise. I saw the look on your face, like you had gone somewhere far away just to survive the moment. And I thought about my sister. Your sister, Sarah. She died 2 years ago. Was married to a man who treated her like property, like something he owned that he could use up and throw away. By the time I found out how bad it was, by the time I came to get her, she was already gone." His voice had gone rough. "I could not save her, but I could save you." Penelope felt something hot and sharp behind her eyes. "You bought me to save me. I bought your contract to free you, but I need you to understand something, Penelope." He took a step closer, his eyes intense. "You are not my property. You are not my servant. This ranch, this house, it is yours as much as mine now. If you want to work, there is plenty that needs doing, and I will pay you fair wages. If you want to just rest and figure out what you want from life, you can do that too. And if you decide you want to leave, want to go somewhere else, then you leave. No one will stop you but the contract. I will burn the contract tonight if you want. You are free, Penelope, truly free. You do not owe me anything." She could not breathe, could not think. This had to be a trick, some elaborate game that would reveal its true nature later. Men did not do things like this. They did not spend money to give someone freedom. "I do not believe you," she whispered. I know. Yates's voice was gentle. I know you have no reason to. But I am hoping that with time you will see I mean what I say. In the meantime, you are safe here. That much I can promise. He showed her the 2 spare bedrooms, both clean with simple beds and dressers. She chose the one with a window facing east toward the sunrise. When Yates left her alone to settle in, she sat on the edge of the bed and tried to understand what had just happened. Freedom. The word felt foreign, impossible. She had been owned for 4 years, passed from hand to hand like currency. She had forgotten what it felt like to make a choice, any choice, without fear of punishment. And now this stranger, this cowboy with kind eyes and a dead sister, was telling her she could just be free. She did not cry. She had learned years ago that tears changed nothing. Instead, she unpacked her 3 dresses, hung them in the small wardrobe, and tried to imagine what tomorrow might bring. Dinner that evening was an awkward affair. Yates had prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and salt pork, and insisted she sit at the table with him. Penelope could not remember the last time she had been invited to eat at a table rather than taking whatever scraps were left in the kitchen. The work around here is honest but hard, Yates said as they ate. Marcus and Finn handle most of the cattle operation, but there is always more that needs doing. If you are interested, we could use help with the horses. I am trying to build up a breeding program and it takes time and patience. I used to work with horses, Penelope said softly. Before. When I was younger. Then maybe you would like to do that again, maybe. She paused, then forced herself to ask the question burning in her mind. What do you get out of this? Truly, Yates set down his fork and met her eyes. Peace, maybe, knowing I did something right for once. Knowing I did not just stand by and watch someone suffer. He shook his head. You do not have to trust me, Penelope, but you do not have to fear me either. That night, alone in her room with a door that locked from the inside, Penelope lay awake listening to the desert sounds through her window. Coyotes called in the distance, and somewhere an owl hooted. The bed was comfortable, the room was hers, and for the first time in 4 years, no one was going to hurt her tonight. She still did not believe it was real. But some small, long-buried part of her wanted desperately to hope. The days that followed developed into an unexpected rhythm. Penelope woke each morning to find Yates already up, preparing coffee in the kitchen. He would nod a greeting, offer her breakfast, and then head out to work with Marcus and Finn. At first, she spent those days simply existing, walking the property, trying to understand the boundaries of this new life. On the 4th day, she found herself drawn to the barn where several horses were stabled. A young Palomino filly caught her attention, skittish and wild-eyed. Penelope approached slowly, speaking softly, and after nearly an hour the filly allowed her touch. She is a troublemaker, that one, came Marcus's voice from behind her. Boss bought her at auction 3 months back, but she will not let any of us near her. She is scared, Penelope said simply. Someone hurt her, Marcus grunted. Probably right about that. You have a hand with horses. I used to. Over the following weeks, Penelope began working with the horses, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. The Palomino filly, whom she named Sunrise, became her special project. Each day she would spend hours in the corral, earning the horses' trust inch by inch. It was slow work, but it was work that meant something, work that healed something broken. Yates watched from a distance but never interfered. Sometimes she would catch him standing by the fence, his expression thoughtful, and when their eyes met, he would smile slightly before returning to his own tasks. In the evenings, they began to talk. Small conversations at first, careful and neutral. He told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to rope and ride before he could properly raid, about losing his parents to fever and taking responsibility for his younger sister, about failing her when she needed him most. Penelope found herself sharing pieces of her own story. About her mother who had died when she was young, about her father who had loved cards and whiskey more than his daughter, about the first man who bought her contract, a merchant who worked her 16 hours a day in his store, about the second, a rancher who had been cruel with his hands and crueler with his words. She did not tell him everything. Some memories were too painful, too private. But with each conversation, some of the weight she carried became a little lighter. One evening, about 2 months after her arrival, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. Yates had been teaching her to read in the evenings, working through an old primer he had found in town. "You are a quick learner," he said as she successfully worked through a difficult passage. "I always wanted to read," Penelope admitted. "My mother knew how and she tried to teach me before she died, but after that there was never time." "Well, now you have time, all the time you need." She looked at him, really looked at him. Over these weeks, she had watched him carefully, searching for signs of the cruelty she had learned to expect from men. But Yates was unfailingly gentle, patient, honest. He worked hard alongside his men, treated them with respect, cared for his animals with genuine affection. When he gave his word, he kept it, and he had kept his promise to her. She was free to come and go as she pleased. He paid her fairly for her work with the horses, keeping careful accounting in a ledger he showed her weekly. He had even taken her to town twice, introducing her to the shopkeepers as his business partner, never as his property. "Why did you never marry?" she asked suddenly. The question surprised them both. Yates was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon. "Came close once," he finally said. "Girl named Elizabeth back in Texas, but she wanted a settled life, a husband who would stay home and work a small farm. That was not me. I needed open spaces, room to breathe. We parted as friends." He paused. "After Sarah died, I suppose I threw myself into building this place. Did not have time or energy for much else. You get lonely, sometimes." He looked at her then, something shifting in his expression. "Less so lately." The air between them felt different suddenly, charged with something Penelope could not quite name. Her heart beat faster, and she found she could not look away from his eyes. "Penelope," he said softly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. All right? Do you still want to leave? Because if you do, if you want to go somewhere else, start fresh where no one knows your history, I will give you the money to do it. No strings, no expectations. I meant what I said that first day." She should say yes. She should take the money, take her freedom, and disappear into a life where she could be anyone, where no one would know she had been bought and sold like livestock. It was the smart thing, the safe thing. But as she looked at Yates, at his honest face and kind eyes, at the home he had given her and the respect he had shown her, she realized something that terrified her. She did not want to leave. "No," she whispered. "I do not want to go. You are sure? You are not just saying that because you think you have to. I am sure." Her voice grew stronger. "This place, this life, it is the first time I have felt like myself since I was 18 years old. The first time I have felt like a person. I do not want to give that up." Yates's smile was like sunrise, warm and genuine. "Then you will stay as long as you want. This is your home, Penelope. Thank you." The words felt inadequate for what she was feeling, but they were all she had. As autumn deepened into winter, something began to grow between them that was more than friendship, but less than either dared to name. Penelope would catch herself watching Yates as he worked, admiring the way he moved, the quiet strength in his hands. Sometimes their fingers would brush as he handed her a cup of coffee, and the contact would send electricity up her arm. She thought he might feel it too, this thing building between them. She saw the way his eyes followed her when he thought she was not looking, heard the way his voice softened when he spoke her name. But he never acted on it, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. One cold December morning, a man rode onto the property, and Penelope's blood turned to ice. It was Harold Kincaid, the third man who had owned her, a gambler from Phoenix who had won her contract in a card game and kept her for 8 months before losing everything and selling her to Whitley. "Well now," Kincaid drawled as he dismounted, his eyes fixing on Penelope where she stood by the corral. "If it is not little Penelope, I heard you got sold again. Came to see if the rumors were true." Yates appeared from the barn, his posture immediately defensive. "Can I help you with something?" "Maybe, maybe not." Kincaid's smile was ugly. "See, I have been thinking, that girl there, I might not have gotten full value when I sold her to Whitley, wondering if the current owner might be interested in selling if the price was right. She is not for sale." Yates's voice was cold steel. "Everything is for sale, friend, just a matter of finding the right price." I said no. Yates moved to stand between Kincaid and Penelope. "And I am not your friend, so I am going to ask you once politely to get back on your horse and leave." Kincaid's expression darkened. "Now hold on. I know my rights. That girl was my property once, and I think I am entitled to—" "Entitled?" Yates cut him off, his hand resting on his gun belt. "You are entitled to nothing. Penelope is not property, she is not for sale. And if you do not leave my land in the next 30 seconds, you and I are going to have a problem." Marcus and Finn had emerged from the barn, standing flanking Yates, their own hands near their weapons. Kincaid looked at the 3 men, calculated his odds, and apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. "This is not over," he said, but he was already mounting his horse. "Yeah, it is," Yates said flatly. "And if I see you around here again, I will not be so polite." They watched until Kincaid disappeared over the ridge. Penelope realized she was shaking, her breath coming in short gasps. The sight of him had brought everything back, all the fear and humiliation and helplessness. "Hey." Yates's hand was on her shoulder, gentle and grounding. "Hey, look at me. He is gone, he cannot hurt you. He could come back. He could. Then I will deal with him. Penelope, I meant what I said. You are under my protection. No one is going to take you anywhere you do not want to go." She looked up at him, at the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, and something inside her broke open. Before she could think about it, before fear could stop her, she wrapped her arms around him and buried her face in his chest. For a heartbeat, Yates went rigid with surprise. Then carefully, his arms came around her, holding her securely but not too tight, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. "I have got you," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe. I promise you are safe." They stood like that for a long time, and Penelope felt something shift fundamentally inside her. This was not gratitude she was feeling. This was not simple relief or friendship. This was something far more dangerous and far more real. That evening, after Marcus and Finn had retired to the bunkhouse, Penelope found Yates on the porch again, staring out at the star-filled sky. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Thank you," she said, "for today, for standing up to him." "You do not need to thank me for that. Any decent man would have done the same." "That has not been my experience." She took a breath, gathering courage. "Yates, I need to tell you something." He turned to look at her, waiting. "When you bought my contract, when you brought me here, I thought you were lying. I thought it was all some game, that eventually you would show your true colors and I would end up hurt again." She met his eyes. "But you did not. Every day you have proven yourself to be exactly who you claim to be. You have shown me more kindness and respect than anyone since my mother died. And I do not know how to process that because I have forgotten how to trust. But I want to. I want to trust you. You can, Yates said, his voice rough with emotion. Penelope, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, no right to expect anything, but I need you to know something too. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. These last few months, having you here, getting to know you, watching you heal and grow stronger, it has meant more to me than I can properly express. You are one of the strongest, bravest people I have ever met. And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of you as someone I was helping and started thinking of you as someone I could not imagine my life without. Penelope's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. What are you saying? I am saying that I have feelings for you. Real feelings. But I will never act on them unless you want me to, unless you feel the same. You have had too many men make decisions for you, control your life. I will not be another one. So I am asking you, Penelope, what do you want? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. What did she want? For so long that question had been irrelevant, impossible. Her wants had not mattered, had been crushed and ignored until she stopped having them altogether. But Yates was asking. He was truly, genuinely asking what she wanted and waiting for her answer like it mattered more than anything in the world. I want you, she said, her voice shaking but certain. I want this, whatever this is between us. I want to see where it could go. And that terrifies me, because I have been hurt so many times, but I think you are worth being brave for. Yates's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind or pull away, he reached up and cupped her cheek in his calloused hand. Can I kiss you? Yes, she breathed. He kissed her like she was made of spun glass, tender and reverent. It was nothing like the rough, demanding kisses she had endured before. This was a question and a promise, gentle and sweet and full of barely restrained longing. When they finally pulled apart, Penelope was crying, but this time the tears were not from pain. Too much? Yates asked, concerned. No, she laughed through her tears. Not too much, just enough. The winter passed in a blur of small, perfect moments. They courted properly, with all the patience and care that Penelope needed to feel truly safe in this new dynamic. Yates continued to treat her as an equal partner in the ranch, consulting her on decisions, valuing her opinions. But now there were other things too. Hands held across the dinner table, stolen kisses in the barn, long conversations that stretched into the night. Penelope blossomed under his attention. The frightened, broken girl who had arrived at the ranch slowly transformed into a confident woman who knew her own mind and her own worth. She laughed more, smiled more, allowed herself to dream about a future that extended beyond mere survival. In early spring, Yates took her to Yuma to see a traveling theater troupe that was performing at the town hall. It was her first real social outing as someone free, as someone courting a respectable rancher rather than someone's property. She wore a new dress that Yates had bought her, deep blue like the evening sky, and he wore his best suit. The play was a comedy, something light and silly, and Penelope found herself laughing until her sides hurt. When Yates took her hand in the darkness, she laced her fingers through his and felt perfectly, completely happy. Afterward, they walked slowly back to where they had left the horses. The streets were quieter now, most people having retired for the evening. Did you enjoy it? Yates asked. It was wonderful. I cannot remember the last time I laughed like that. You should laugh like that every day. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Penelope, there is something I want to ask you, but I need you to know that you can say no. That will not change anything between us. I will not be hurt or angry. I will just keep on courting you for as long as you will let me. Her heart began to race. What is it? Marry me. The words came out in a rush. I know it has not been that long, and I know you have been through hell and probably need more time, but I have to at least ask because I love you. I am completely, thoroughly in love with you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you what love should actually look like. But only if you want that too, only if you choose it freely. Penelope stared at him, at this good man who had saved her not just from a terrible situation, but from losing herself entirely, who had given her freedom and respect and patience and love, who was now asking her to choose him, really choose, with no coercion or pressure or expectation. "Yes," she said, and the word felt like flying. "Yes, I will marry you." Yates whooped with joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around right there on the street. When he set her down, he kissed her soundly, and Penelope kissed him back with everything she had. They were married a month later in a small church in Yuma, with Marcus and Finn as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Penelope wore a white dress that the seamstress had worked on for 2 weeks straight, with tiny flowers embroidered on the bodice. Yates wore a new black suit and could not stop grinning. When the preacher asked if she took this man to be her husband, Penelope answered with a clear, strong voice, "I do." And she meant it with every fiber of her being. The year that followed was the happiest of Penelope's life. She and Yates settled into married life with surprising ease, their relationship built on a foundation of genuine friendship and mutual respect. They worked the ranch together, made decisions together, built their future together. The horse breeding program flourished under Penelope's care. Sunrise, the skittish Palomino filly, grew into a magnificent mare and became the foundation of their breeding stock. Penelope's reputation for working with difficult horses spread, and soon people were bringing their problem animals from miles around, paying good money for her expertise. In their second year of marriage, Penelope realized she was pregnant. When she told Yates, he went pale and then red and then swept her up in his arms, careful not to squeeze too tight. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating like he could not quite believe it. "We are really having a baby." Their son was born in late winter of 1885, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined spirit. They named him Samuel, after Yates's father, and he became the center of their universe. Watching Yates with their son made Penelope fall in love with him all over again. He was a devoted father, patient and playful, always willing to get down on the floor and play or stay up through the night when Samuel was fussy. He treated their child with the same respect and gentleness he had always shown Penelope. When Samuel was 2, Penelope became pregnant again, this time with twins. The pregnancy was difficult and there were moments when Penelope was afraid, but Yates never left her side. He held her hand through the worst of it, whispered encouragement, reminded her how strong she was. The twins, a boy and a girl they named Thomas and Rose, arrived screaming and healthy in the autumn of 1887. The house that had once been so quiet was now filled with noise and chaos and laughter, and Penelope had never been happier. One evening, when the twins were a few months old and Samuel was playing with his wooden horses on the floor, Penelope stood at the kitchen window watching the sunset. Yates came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," she admitted. "About where I was 5 years ago, about where I am now, about how impossible all of this seemed. Do you ever regret it, staying here, marrying me?" She turned in his arms to face him, cupping his face in her hands. "Never, not for one single moment. You gave me my life back, Yates. You gave me myself back. And then you gave me a family, a home, a future worth living. How could I possibly regret that?" "I love you," he said simply. "More every day, I love you too." They stood there together, holding each other while their children played nearby, and Penelope marveled at the strange and winding path that had brought her here. All the pain, all the fear, all the darkness had led to this moment, this life, this love. She had been sold 4 times before Yates Hawthorne walked into that saloon in Yuma. She had begged not to be sold again, had pleaded with owners who saw her as nothing more than property. But Yates had promised her something different. He had promised her a choice, and she had chosen this. Chosen him. Chosen to stay. As the years passed, the ranch continued to prosper. Samuel grew into a responsible young man who loved working with the cattle alongside his father. Thomas showed an early aptitude for figures and kept the ranch's books with impressive precision. Rose developed her mother's gift with horses and could often be found in the corrals, working with the young stock. Penelope's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout Arizona Territory and beyond. She developed techniques for working with traumatized animals that were both effective and humane, and she published several articles in agricultural journals about her methods. People came from as far as California and Texas to learn from her, to buy horses she had trained. But more than her professional success, Penelope took pride in the family she and Yates had built. Their home was filled with warmth and love, a safe haven not just for them but for anyone who needed it. They took in a young woman named Iris, who had been in a situation similar to Penelope's, giving her a job and a place to heal. They employed several other ranch hands over the years, always treating them with fairness and respect. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates took Penelope back to Yuma, to the saloon where he had first bought her contract. It had changed hands several times and was now a respectable hotel. They stood on the street outside, hand in hand. "I remember standing here that day," Yates said quietly. "Watching you walk out of that building, so scared but trying so hard not to show it. I remember thinking that if I could just get you to trust me, just give you a chance at something better, maybe I could make up for failing Sarah." "You did not fail her," Penelope said firmly. "You did not know how bad things were, and even if you had known, you cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. But me, you saved me, Yates, and I helped save you too, I think." "You did," he agreed. "I was so focused on the past, on my guilt and my regrets, that I forgot to live. You reminded me what it means to look forward, to hope, to love." They kissed there on that street corner. 10 years of love and trust and partnership in that single moment. The children grew up and eventually started lives of their own. Samuel married a schoolteacher from Tucson and took over the day-to-day running of the ranch. Thomas went east to study law and returned to open a practice in Phoenix. Rose, true to form, started her own horse training operation on a piece of land Yates and Penelope gave her as a wedding present when she married a young veterinarian. As Penelope and Yates grew older, they spent more time simply enjoying each other's company. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, just as they had in those early days, watching the desert sunset and talking about everything and nothing. One such evening, when Penelope was in her early 50s, Yates suddenly spoke. "Do you remember what I asked you that first week you were here? About whether you wanted to leave?" "Of course I remember. I have been thinking about that question, about how I gave you a choice, let you decide if you wanted to stay." He took her hand, his thumb rubbing across her knuckles. "I want to ask you again, Penelope, do you want to stay? Are you happy here with me, with this life we have built?" Penelope smiled, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "Yates Hawthorne, I chose to stay 30 years ago, and I have chosen to stay every single day since then. I would choose this life, choose you, 1,000 times over, 1,000,000 times. I have never been happier, never felt more at home than I do right here beside you." "Good," Yates said, his voice thick with emotion. Because I plan on spending whatever time we have left making sure you never regret that choice." "Impossible," Penelope said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I could never regret choosing love." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in shades of gold and crimson. Behind them, the house was filled with the sounds of their grandchildren playing, Samuel and his wife having brought them for a visit. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to everything they had built together. Penelope thought about the girl she had been, the one who had packed those 3 dresses over and over, who had begged not to be sold again, who had forgotten what it meant to have hope. That girl felt like a lifetime ago, like a different person entirely, and in a way she was. Because that girl had been given a choice by a cowboy with kind eyes and a good heart. And she had chosen to stay, chosen to trust, chosen to love, and in doing so she had chosen everything. The years continued to flow by like water in the desert, precious and life-giving. Penelope and Yates grew old together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing season. They became grandparents many times over, their home often filled with the laughter of children and grandchildren who knew nothing but love and security. On a warm spring evening in 1912, when they were both in their early 70s, Yates and Penelope sat on their porch for what would be the last time. Yates had been ill for several weeks, his strong body finally giving way to age and a weak heart. But he had insisted on spending this evening outside, watching the sunset one more time with the woman he loved. "It has been a good life," he said quietly, his hand clasped in hers. "The best life," Penelope agreed, her voice steady despite her tears. "You gave me everything, Yates. Freedom, choice, love, family, you gave me myself." "We gave those things to each other," he corrected gently. "You saved me just as much as I saved you." Samuel came out onto the porch, his face grave. "Papa, the doctor says you should come inside, rest." "In a minute, son. Your mother and I are watching the sunset." Samuel nodded and withdrew, understanding some moments were sacred. They sat in silence as the sky blazed with color, the desert showing off one last time for them. Yates's breathing was labored, but his grip on Penelope's hand remained firm. "Do you remember," he said softly, "that day I asked you what you wanted?" "Every detail," Penelope whispered. "Best decision I ever made giving you that choice. Best decision you ever made choosing to stay." "I know. I love you, Penelope Hawthorne. I have loved you from the moment you decided to trust me, and I will love you beyond whatever comes next. I love you too. Always." Yates took one last long look at the sunset, at the land they had built their life on, at the woman who had given his life meaning. Then he closed his eyes and peacefully slipped away. Penelope sat there holding his hand as the stars came out, as their children and grandchildren gathered around them, as the desert night settled over the ranch. She cried, grieving the loss of her partner, her best friend, her great love. But underneath, the grief was gratitude for every moment they had shared, every choice they had made together. She lived for another 8 years, continuing to work with horses, and spending as much time as possible with her children and grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the cowboy who had given a desperate young woman a choice and changed both their lives forever. When she finally joined Yates in 1920, she was surrounded by 3 generations of family, all of them products of the love and freedom she and Yates had built together. Her last words were, "I am coming, my love. I chose to stay then and I choose to be with you now." They buried her beside Yates on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read, "Penelope Hawthorne, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She chose love." And years later, when visitors came to the ranch that still bore the Hawthorne name, when they asked about the couple buried on that hill, the family would tell them a story. A story about a young woman who had been sold and broken, and a cowboy who gave her the one thing she needed most, the freedom to choose her own path. They would tell about how she chose to stay, chose to trust, chose to love, and how that choice had created a legacy that lived on in every person who bore their name, in every horse that was treated with gentleness, in every person who remembered that freedom and love were choices worth making. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, always run by someone who understood that the foundation Yates and Penelope had laid was built on more than land and cattle and horses. It was built on respect, on partnership, on the revolutionary idea that everyone deserved the right to choose their own destiny, and on quiet evenings, when the desert sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson, those who knew the story would sit on that old porch and remember. Remember a cowboy who kept his promises. Remember a woman who found her courage. Remember a love that had transformed two broken people into something whole and beautiful and lasting. The wind still blew across the Arizona desert, carrying dust and stories and memories. But now they also carried the legacy of two people who had proven that even from the darkest circumstances, even from the deepest pain, something beautiful could grow. All it took was one person brave enough to offer a choice, and another person brave enough to make it. Penelope Owens had begged not to be sold again. Yates Hawthorne had promised that this time she could choose if she wanted to stay, and she had chosen to stay. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to, and that had made all the difference.